Each and every day, we are faced with obstacles and we are faced with challenges that can either completely tear us down, or if we can figure out how to overcome them, we can learn to thrive even through difficult situations. That's this season on the 306 podcast. Welcome to the 306 podcast. My name is Scott. If you are a local, I just want to welcome you back. And if this is your first time here, thank you so much for stopping by. We're really excited to have you here. And if you enjoy this content, please consider subscribing. Here at the 306 podcast, we are trying to find ways that we can thrive in every area of our life. And so that would be in our relationships, in our friendships, in our workspace, just anywhere that you face struggles. We're looking to find ways to overcome and thrive even in the midst of those struggles. So first of all, I want to say that we are recording from our brand new Studio 306 here at Visual Element Studios. And this studio has a great story. And that's kind of what I want to talk about because this studio has brought in a lot of struggles. It brought in a lot of joy. There's just a lot of things. It just looks like a studio. But even in simple things like a studio, you can learn so much about who you are and what you struggle with and just see areas of your life that you need to work on, you need to focus on. And so I want to talk today a little bit about the story of how we got into this new studio. If you remember back in season 1, we were in this exact same studio. This is the exact same place that we were in for season 1 of the Grace Students podcast. It's also where we recorded our Grace Students podcast. And after watching season 1, or even throughout season 1, I just started getting really dissatisfied with how our podcast was looking. I mean, I didn't feel like it looked like a legit podcast. It looked like I threw up some microphones and a table and was like, hey, this is a studio, this is a podcast, and this is what we do. And granted, there's nothing wrong with that. But I think in everything that you do, you should be looking to grow. You should be looking to make it better. You should be looking to make it become kind of its own thing. And maybe that's not the right way to phrase it, but you want it to grow and you want it to develop as you go through it, right? So around episode, and really, if you go back and watch the first season, you see that there are a ton of changes visually with the podcast because, each week I'm like, let's just start getting the podcast out. First and foremost, we just need to record a podcast. Then a couple episodes went through and I'm like, all right, now we need to start tweaking things. And then we had a set change and then we went from 3 cameras down to 1 camera. Then we added 2 cameras. Then we went back to 3 cameras. And it was just like the show had very little direction, creatively, at least. I feel like the content was still good, but the vision, the visuals of the show weren't quite there. So around episode 20, I'm just like, something needs to change. We can't have a legit podcast that looks like this. So we got to see our episode 30 and we wrapped up season 1 and I kind of just went back to the drawing table and I'm like, all right, how do we do this? How do we make this podcast look like a legit podcast? And so it came down to pretty much we have to build a new studio or we need to extremely simplify. And so my wife and I came up with a couple of mock-ups because she works pretty close with my companies. And we came up with some mock-ups and we looked at them and we kind of decided, okay, this is kind of the feel that we're going for. This is kind of how we want it to look. And then it came down to, well, how much are we really looking to spend to make this happen? Because if you notice in life, a lot of decisions will come down to, can we afford to do it? And even if we can afford to do it, is it a wise allocation of our resources? Should we be putting our resources into something like this? And to be quite frank, I mean, Love Local at this point is not making money. I mean, so it's being built up through my marketing company, Visual Element Media. And so it's not like we're making money on this. This is something I want to grow into something that we can make money off of. And so it brings about some interesting decisions. You know, how do we do this? How do we do this as cheaply as possible, but at the same time make it look as professional as possible? And so I think we were able to do that, and I kind of want to share with you some of the things that we did in order to do that. So first of all, Amazon is a great thing. And so we had a lot of the equipment that we already needed. We had some of the mics. We bought an extra mic because we're going to be recording additional series in here that are going to be 2, 3, sometimes 4 people. And so we want to make sure that we're able to accommodate all of that. And then we wanted it to have like this, like the typical look that's happening kind of now, where it's like we have this farm style table and we have the wood plank walls, and you know, I wanted that look. And initially I didn't want it to look Southwest, but it just ended up looking Southwest. And so we have like the cactus, we have a Texas book, we have this style table, and it looks really nice. Like I'm not saying that it doesn't, but you know, we had some of these decisions, and so this table, me not being a crafty person at all. I mean, whenever I say I'm not good at building things, like painting is difficult for me. It's hard for me to even paint, let alone build something. And so I knew we needed a nice size table, and I know we wanted something behind. I mean, and if you look over on this camera, you can see this like credenza back here. And I'm like, this is what I want. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to build it. You know, it can't be hard to build a table. And surprisingly, it wasn't terribly hard. You know, once you got everything done. And I kind of didn't want it to look perfect either. Like I wanted it to have flaws. I wanted it to have inconsistencies in it. And it does. And so with the help of my dad cutting some of the boards, you know, I constructed it, I guess. And my wife stained it, and then we put it together, and all that was great. So we built the table and the credenza for like $50-$60, something like that. All the wood, all the stain, some screws, and all that kind of stuff. And I actually think it turned out better than I thought it was going to. And I love when that happens. I love when something turns out better than you even thought of it. And so, but it wasn't easy. I mean, it was a struggle of, I had asked some buddies of mine to help me out, but then it was raining, and then I don't have a vehicle to get the material, and so my dad had to pick it up, and so we just ran into these struggles, and then my fear of putting this together and like it collapsing, you know, and so I'm putting like 5 extra screws in each part, and so it was a great learning experience. But the one thing that I took away just from building this table, I mean, a table taught me this, and it seems so simple and it seems so easy, but it's so easy to get caught up in things, and it's this. If you slow down, if you really consider what you're doing, and you even kind of have to play devil's advocate to some extent, and say, okay, well, that's the way I want it to be, but what if I did it this way? Or what about this option? And then you weigh those different options out, you can come up with a really good thing. And I'm the kind of person, if you know me, I am thinking at like 1,000 miles a second. I don't have time to slow down. I don't want to slow down. I just want to go, go, go. But I also find that I make a lot of mistakes by doing that. And it took a table for me to come to the realization of, you know what, there is some benefit to just slowing down and really consider what you're doing. So that was a positive thing that happened with the table, and same thing with the credenza. One of the not so great things that happened was we were hanging this wall over here. I was hanging the wall, and it was a busy day, and I just got the drops in, and so I was really excited to get them up to see what they looked like, to start to get them to frame out this studio, because we completely reoriented the studio. But so I'm hanging this up, and it's held up by two, like a cross beam, a metal cross beam on a metal stand. And if you go check out the studio tour that I think is posted by now, go check out the 306 studio tour, and you'll see what I mean, because I address it in that video. And so I'm hanging, and I was in a rush. And so instead of screwing the side into the wall to hold the crossbar up, I just rested it on top of the ledge. And so it had fallen off a couple of times as I'm clamping the wall together. And I had one last clamp. And I'm like, you know what? I should drill it in, but I just have one more clamp. Once I clamp it, then I'll drill it in. It'll be fine. And the side fell off, and my pinky finger was in between where the bar and the other crossbeam met, and there was a little bit of a gap, and my pinky was sitting right in there. And I'll show it on this one, and it just clamped my finger together and just cut it right in half. And the trauma of it was so great that it didn't even bleed. Like it was such a quick happening that it wasn't bleeding, and it hurt quite a bit. And I may have said some things out loud that I'm not thrilled about, but it hurt. And so I looked at it, got sick in my stomach, because I am not good with that kind of injury, or those kinds of things. And the backdrop's just laying on the floor. It's getting all wrinkled. And so I'm like, oh, okay. So with one hand, I try to like straighten it out so it's not wrinkling and everything. And then I look back at my finger, and it's just, the front of my finger is just hanging off, right? And I'm like, it's still not bleeding. Like, this is weird. At the same time, I'm thinking, oh, well, maybe I have some time to like get some things done. And so then I really looked at it, and I'm like, that's not good. So I call my wife, and I tell her, I'm like, hey, I cut my finger. And she's like, all right. She's like, I'll get the first aid kit out. So I come home. She looks at it. She like gasps, which makes me even more like weak in my stomach. And I'm like in this like cold sweat, and it's not good. So my mom ends up coming up to watch the boys, and she's like, yeah, you need to go to the doctor, you need to get that stitched or something. So we go to the urgent care, and the doctor looks at it, and he's like, yeah, that's going to need a stitch or two. And I'm like, great. And so he hits me with the Novocaine, right? And that is not pleasant. 3 shots of the Novocaine, and I'm like, I just need to lay down, and you can, work on my finger. And he finished up, and I'm like, okay, that took longer than I expected. And I said, all right, what's the damage? And he's like, 7 stitches. And I'm like, oh, great. So there's 7 stitches that were holding my finger together. And all of that to say this: if you work on a computer at all, you understand how important your left pinky finger is. I mean, that's your A, that's your S, Z, X, Q, W, your tab, your caps lock, your shift. And if you do any kind of video editing, that's like all of your shortcuts are done with your left pinky. And so I think that was God's way of showing me that, like with the table, a positive experience, which was slow down, enjoy making this table. I loved making this table and the credenza. I loved it. I got to enjoy it. I soaked it up. And then when we brought it to the studio to actually like put together, we brought our boys we brought both of our boys, or one of our boys, I can't remember. But we brought our boys. They were both here. I can say that for certain right now. They were both here. They were handing me screws. They were handing me, tools and things just to build it. And it was a family thing. All my wife and my 2 boys were here, and we put the credenza, we put the table together, and it was great. Versus rushing to get something done as quickly as possible for that instant gratification, that instant satisfaction, like with the backdrop. And that ended bad. I still don't have any feeling in my finger. I can't really type with it real well. I can move it and all that stuff, and it's gonna be kind of ugly from here on out. It's gonna be a pretty nasty scar because it's like a It's not even like it's like a horseshoe, but there's like half of a millimeter holding the skin still on my finger, and so they stitched all the way around it. And the pinky tissue is so soft, I guess, that they couldn't stitch it the way you would normally stitch it. I don't know. But here's the thing. If I would have just taken my time, if I would have enjoyed the experience of putting up a stupid wall, it could have prevented me from going through some pain. And so what I would share with you today is this. If you're the kind of person that's just looking to get through things, that's just looking to cross things off your list, get things done as quickly as possible, as fast as possible, you're probably going to find out that you end up getting hurt a little bit more. You end up having a little bit more struggles because you're just rushing through things versus taking the time to enjoy it. Putting the table together was difficult. Hanging the wall was not that difficult. I made it difficult because I was rushing. Putting this table together was a lot more difficult than hanging a backdrop on a bar. It took much longer. It tested me, in my craftsmanship, I guess. Doesn't take a whole lot of craft to hang something up on a bar. And so what I would say is take some time in doing what you're doing and enjoy it. Even if it's something that you don't necessarily enjoy doing, maybe relish in the fact that, hey, I get to do this anyway. I mean, and the argument can break down, definitely, in certain areas. But for things in life that you have to go through, take your time. Like, it's not a race. Life goes by fast enough. You don't need to wish it away any faster. So that would be my encouragement to you. And so I just want to thank you for watching our first episode in the new podcast studio. And I really hope that you enjoyed it. If you liked it, please like and share it with someone else. And subscribe to our YouTube channel. We would really appreciate that. Just search Love Local PA. Or the 306 podcast, and you can subscribe there. And you can also join us on social media on Facebook and Instagram. Again, just search for Love Local PA on those networks. And we would love to have you join and become a local here at Love Local. It's absolutely free at this point. And so just go to lovelocalpa.com. You can sign up. You can become a member, and then you'll get notified of when we release additional content. And I would also suggest going back and watching our vision video for this season, because we're going to be releasing a lot of new content that I think that you're really going to enjoy. So again, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.